Is it working? Oh, I think sound is working now. Okay, that's not a relevant message. My phone can go over there. Okay, right. So, I think everything's okay. Ooh. So yeah, so basically my laptop has its had its Ethernet turned off, and therefore when I started the stream, it was just buffering all over the place, and hopefully because it was using the Wi-Fi, and then just all heck broke loose. So hopefully it should be stable now. I think both the OBS and my playback are using the Ethernet. Hopefully, so it should be okay. Uh, Also, other news: I have a new computer, which doesn't yet work. Come on, can I? There we go. It's just sitting there. So soon I don't have screens for that, but once I do, I'll. Oh, good, good. Stream seems to be pretty okay. So once I've finished this computer, I don't have any monitors for it yet, but once that's working, I'll start streaming on that, and that will open more possibilities for stream. Like I'll be able to stream video games and stuff like that, which I, as of yet, haven't had a chance to do, because my laptop just like it can barely handle video games on their own, let alone streaming them. So that should be cool. And before we actually get into the stream, just another thing that I have to go at 8 p.m., which is an hour after stream is supposed to start. So there is a hard end to the stream, but I don't think we'll get that far. Well, as in like I don't think that's not an unreasonable time to do. So basically, today I thought we would do a discussion, like a discussion of how undo should work, right? Because this seemed like something that was so obvious. Like you don't even need to like. There are multiple ways of doing undo. Wait, what? Like you just press whatever key to undo, and you get back to the last state. But it's nowhere near as simple as that, as it turned out. I made a an issue on GitHub, and then newbie to someone new to Rust came and started doing it, and I was like, hold on, this code does exactly what I said undo should do, but it doesn't do what I wanted, right? Like there's something weird is going on, and pretty much like I'm not sure. It has to do with what the cursor should do, because undo at the end of the day, like if you have a file, I don't know, let's open something. If I make a change and undo it, then the state of the file, it's obvious what you have to do to that, right? You just have to revert the state of the file, but you can potentially move the cursor in between and edit. So let's say I delete this, go down here, and then I don't know, delete a line, and then if I undo a step and undo again, like where do I expect the cursor to end up? And that's like kind of weird. And I was like, okay, well, of course that's intuitive as well, but it's really not, because the way Sapling implemented it at the moment is that you have hold on, let's get something to draw. Will OBS work? It does. Right. New. Let's get something to draw on. So essentially, if you're making edits, you're going to have a series of snapshots, right? And in a text editor, that's text in some representation. And in Sapling, those are trees. So we're going to have, maybe this is the first tree, and it has like a tree below it. And this is the first snapshot. So this is when you boot up the text editor, this is what's being displayed. and then we might have more, so we might make some change and we get another tree that's different, and it goes down potentially, and this is another one, and we'll just end up with a sequence of these snapshots. And okay, so that's intuitive. If you are pointing at every point in the edit process, you're pointing to a snapshot, and it's like, hey, this is the one we're on right now. And so let's say we're here, and we have this snapshot of the document selected, and we redo. Well, you go to here, right? Like you jump, and we now update our pointer to the root to this node. And if we undo, then we'd go back here, and undo again, we'd go back to here. And this seems very, very trivial, right? Like, of course, this is how undo works, right? But it gets a bit more complicated, because the snapshots at the moment are not just tracking the state of the tree, they're also tracking the position of the cursor. Okay, so in the way Sapling works right now is that this snapshot, this is our initial snapshot. We have both, this is the tree, so we have a pointer to the root stored in our list of snapshots. We also have a record of where the cursor is. So let's say it's here, whatever. Or if this is the first one, then it will almost certainly be at the root. Hold on, we can get another color for this. Oh, X. There we go. Oh, what have I done? Here we go. So we have the cursor, and the red lines in this are saying where the cursor is at every step. And let's say I want to replace something further down the tree. So I would move the cursor around somewhere in here. And so we move, let's grab some text. So we move cursor, and then at some point we make an edit as well. And then we end up with this snapshot where we've moved the tree and the cursor is pointing somewhere else. Like, oh, come on. Like here. Okay. And this is all very well. Like, this is a perfectly valid thing. And then Sapling would just, as soon as you move the cursor around and make an edit, it would store a snapshot with the cursor location and the current state of the tree, and it would move on. So you would move the cursor again. I'll just shorten that to move cursor, and then make edit. And then two things would happen, and you might have another location. And this seemed okay, right? And like, it's pretty intuitive to do. Like, what happens if we're here at this point? Let's have another color like blue. What happens if we're selecting this current snapshot and we undo? Well, we undo back to this snapshot, and so we load up this tree, and along with it we load up the cursor location from this. And strictly speaking, we should note that this is the cursor location before the edit, because some edits can move the cursor around. So we might end up with a different cursor location after the edit. Can I demonstrate this happening? Just so we have an example. So we should be on master cargo build. Oh, yeah, I'm... Ooh. Oh, carg run. Interesting. Okay, let's make this a bit bigger. So an example of where we might end up having the cursor move during an edit is, let's say we're here and we insert, we insert after 3 nulls. Okay, so over the course of the edit, before the edit, we were selecting true, and then just before the edit, we have true selected, and then as far as Sapling is concerned, this means that the cursor is the 0th child of the root. Okay, that's how Sapling would store the cursor. Then we do an insert. We insert after null. Oops. Insert after 3 nulls. And now the cursor, directly before the edit, it was the 0th child, and directly after the edit, it's now the, what's that, 0, 1, 2, 3. It's the 3rd child. And so we've kind of got to track that in our snapshot thing as well. We've got 2 kind of cursor locations flying around. And we can kind of, oh, come on, where's GIMP? So we could kind of amend our document. Let's say we have a different shade of red, say darker red. Let's say, well, this original snapshot has no edit associated with it. So all we're interested in, like, the edit is kind of the creation of the document, right, in the computer's memory. So realistically, there isn't a cursor location before this, right? Because, like, where was the cursor before we created the tree? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So strictly speaking, we only have a pointer after. And is there an eraser? Excuse me. I expected. Let's get something white to print. Okay, so we have the cursor location after this edit. Then we might move the cursor around, which oh, come on. Move tool. So, oh, jeepers. Okay, move cursor. So, what? So the move cursor is basically happening here, right? It's going from the cursor state directly after the first edit, which is where we spawned the cursor. We move the cursor around a bit, and we end up at this red arrow, right? And then we make an edit, and then we end up at this cursor location, but of the old tree. And then over the course of making an edit, we end up at wherever the cursor location might be after the edit. And this could be the same, right? A lot of the time, the cursor won't even be moved. So we'd have 2 pointers to the same node occasionally. And perhaps this one, we did in fact change the state of the tree, change the location of the cursor. So this moved from here to here over the course of the edit. And there's kind of a bit of friction here, which is, if I were to undo a change, I want to get the cursor back to the location that it was just before that change. Okay, so let's say I was here. This is blue, isn't it? I'm not here anymore. I'm at this edit, and I want to undo a step. Well, what I'm really undoing is the edit that caused this section of the tree to happen. So I want to go back to this point here. So I'll want to move the pointer of the trees back to here, because I've undone a step. We've gone from this state of the document to this state, which is the state before the edit that we undid. But I would kind of, like, when I undo something in a text editor, the primary reason why I would undo something is that I want to make the change that I did again. So what I'd quite like is for the cursor location to not end up at the location it was directly before the edit that we go back to. All right, because remember, snapshots correspond to edits, and the edit happens just before the snapshot, right? The edit happens kind of here, if you like. It is when the edit happens. It's just before this. Because when we had this red cursor location, this is after we've moved the cursor. But moving the cursor doesn't edit the tree. So this cursor here still kind of belongs to this state of the tree, right? Which is the initial state. So we're in the initial state, we move the cursor somewhat, and we're still in the initial state, it's just the cursor is moved. Because the cursor is not part of the tree as such. And then, like, what do you do when you undo? If I were to make this change and undo it, well, what do I expect? I expect to undo back to this red arrow. So I update the pointer to here, because this is the, this is the snapshot I'm going for, but I want the cursor to be here. And, like, okay, so that's fine. You should store the last cursor location, and we could just assign those to the tree. So we could, like, here's where we did just before this edit, so that when we undo, like, I don't know, this all feels very complicated for something that should be simple. That's one thing. Like, I don't know if there's a way of doing this that is just simple and intuitive rather than this, like, whole craziness. What I eventually came up with, to cut a long story short, is if I create a new layer, it's white, is that we've kind of, our view of the tree as a sequence of snapshots is a bit naive, is not quite the right word, but it's a bit not looking at it the right way, because what we could say is that we have let's say we have the initial snapshot, and this is the state of the tree, and then we potentially move the cursor. So we have a thing, and this is a cursor move, like C for cursor, and we have another state here, and then we do any number of cursor movements, and then we do another edit. We do an edit specifically. If it was another cursor movement, it would be part of this. So we do an edit, and we end up with another state in the tree, or in, like, the series of states, except that these two trees are the same. So if we have a set of trees down here, my very weirdly drawn trees, these two would both point here, because we haven't changed the tree at all. We're just saying, oh, we've moved the cursor, so we keep the tree the same and update the location of the cursor, but nothing else. And then we make an edit, so we have a new tree and potentially a new cursor location, right? We could have moved the cursor here, and then we could move it again, and we move the cursor around a bit more. We're still not changing the tree, and then we make another edit, right? And then we get another pointer, and this is a new tree. And yeah, like, this now seems very linear, right? We've got things combining, but it's still very linear. And when we have an edit, let's say I were to undo from either of hold on, colors. So suppose we're here at this point, and I want to undo a step. Well, this is just after some cursor movement. So what I'm actually undoing is this edit here, because this is the last edit that happened. And we're kind of working on the assumption that an edit, we're undoing the edit for the sole reason, or one of the reasons why we would undo an edit is because we want to redo this change, or the last change we made. And the last change was here. We moved the cursor, but that doesn't count as a change. So then I think we kind of have a couple of options. What Sapling currently does is it jumps us all the way back to here, which is like, what? Like, because if we did this, then we'd have to redo the cursor movement and redo a step. But instead, I think Sapling should jump here for an undo. And if we were to redo this edit, so undoing, we should jump over the edit. And then redoing, let's say we redo this edit from here, then we should redo and jump here. So we have two different places we want to go to for undoing and redoing an edit. And I discovered after some playing around that this is not what Vim does. I thought it was. And it turns out what Vim does is that it just moves the cursor to the beginning of the bit of text that was changed by the edit. Whether or not that's before or after the edit happened. And I was doing some fiddling around with this because ID view. Right. If we delete a word here, then move somewhere else and undo, it jumps us back to where the cursor was just before the edit. But if I made a selection and then did an edit and then move the cursor somewhere and undo, it doesn't respawn my selection, which is like perhaps intuitive because selections are a different thing to cursors in Vim, so they're kind of orthogonal issues. But now you have the weird thing of like, oh yeah, well, GV gets you the last selection you had back. But what happens if I selected something, then deleted, and now do GV? Right, Vim gets really confused. As far as I can tell, this is not the last selection I had. If I undo and now GV, then it's fine. And I think it'd be nice to like avoid this weird behavior. Oh yeah, does anyone have any thoughts, by the way, of like if I'm missing something? Because I might be. There ought to be a simple way of doing undo. So yeah, storing the snapshots as node cursor is exactly what Sapling does. If we look in editor DAG, then we have root history is a snapshot, a list of nodes and the cursors. But the thing is, I don't think this is very intuitive, and it doesn't work as well. Because let's say we made an edit here and we undo, it jumps us to the root. Like, why? That's like, that doesn't even make any sense. Like, because the cursor was here, I made a change, and the cursor is still here. It's still at the 0th child of the root, and then we undo and it jumps to the root. And that's because we're jumping to the location of the cursor. I think that's no. The way I thought about it was, oh yeah, well, this is obviously happening because the cursor location is attached to the wrong change. We're undoing past an edit, and therefore we have to load the tree that's even further behind the edit, and that tree has the snapshot of the cursor before it happened. So we're kind of jumping over two edits or something weird like that. But the thing is, if we redo a change, then the behavior is exactly what we expect. So if I go somewhere else and redo, it does exactly what we expect. Okay, which is to move the cursor to the location of the edit. And this works however many times you do changes. Let's say I inserted an array, replaced with an array, inserted true, etc. And then I undid the change a couple of times and moved the cursor around to here and redo. Then it jumps us to the location. And that basically tells me that the snapshots we're storing here, we're storing a node so a tree, and the cursor path that we should use if we're going to redo to that tree. But what I think we need... Yeah, exactly. So that's what I thought. I thought, oh yeah, the incorrect, like the cursor that we store in the history is incorrect. But it's not. Like, it is correct if we're redoing. Like, it's exactly what I would expect. If we redo over and edit, I expect the... Jeepers. Okay. Oh, I forgot I was in Vim. If I go to the back and then make some edit, move the cursor somewhere else, and redo the edit. Excuse me. What? Oh, yeah. We undo a step and then move the cursor and then redo. This is exactly what I expect, right? I'm not sure from anyone else. Like, if I were to do the same thing in a text editor, I delete the contents of something, I undo that change. Oops. So I make some change, I undo it, and now I go somewhere completely different, and I redo the change. I should jump to the location that the cursor was after the change. But if I undo over a change, so I've redone a change and I undo, this single location is causing problems, right? And I think it's just that this cursor location can't be... we can't just store one cursor location, is what I'm thinking. We need to store two. We need to store one for undo and one for redo. That is what I'm thinking. It's kind of... It's hard to explain this. Because undo is something like... You can kind of feel when it's done right and when it's done wrong. But as with anything, like, about stuff happening in time, just explaining it becomes really, really difficult, because you're kind of like, oh yeah, and then here, and then we do some change, and then we go back in time, and like it all gets a bit crazy. Perhaps if I just demonstrate what Kakyoin does, because Kakyoin has an interesting way of looking at the cursor, because in Kakyoin, yeah, that's what I came to. But I went like all the way around the houses and like round the houses several times, and then came back to the conclusion that having two cursor locations is correct. And like for Vim, it works fine to only have one, because you're not really like the cursor is just a kind of a point in the text, whereas in Sapling, it's kind of like a selection, right? The root is you're selecting the entire file, and I could go down and now I'm selecting this whole block, because this whole block is what gets deleted if I were to delete the cursor, or replaced if I replace the cursor with null. And like, so that makes sense. So that I think the cursor should be a selection. And one of the things I want to do is, in fact, is to have the cursor kind of highlight all of the descendants of the node that the cursor's in. So in this case, we would select these two to say, oh yeah, we're selecting the object. But also, by the way, all of this is actually still part of what you're selecting. But I haven't got around to that yet. The refactoring I'm doing will help this. So yeah, I think this is very similar to how Kakyoin treats the cursor, because Kakyoin has multiple cursors. I'll try and find something. How would I best get an example? So let's say I wanted to do find and replace on... Oh, Kakyoin actually has mouse input. Wow. So let's say I wanted to find and replace edit success in this area. Right. In Vim, what we'd have to do is we'd make the selection... Oh, come on. Yeah, we'd make this as a selection, and then we'd do find and replace, like, as one thing. We'd press, like, : s/ to start, find, and replace. Whereas in what's it called? Kakuen. In Kakuen, we'd do things differently. We would find a place to select the cursor. So it would be here. Then we could say a. What? Why is? Okay, well, let's say we got this selection working, and then we would say, like, I don't know, S to start a search, and then we would search for edit success, and it's now created us. How many is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, it doesn't matter exactly how many of them there are, but the point is that there are multiple cursors on the screen, and each cursor is kind of bound to a selection. So there's this selection with this block as its this block is the selection, and then the E is the cursor. And so if I were to do this, then now I wanted to do the replace, well, I would use C for delete the selection and start editing. And now we're in insert mode in all of these cursors. So I could start typing, I don't know, hello world. And in every one of the positions, it starts typing. And that's quite cool. I just really rate that as a feature in editors, to be able to have multiple selections works like so seamlessly. And the important thing is what happens when you undo. Because if I were to undo the hello world, I would expect to go back here. Because this is the locations of all of the selections, which kind of like cursors and selections are the same in Kakuen, or they're so strongly related you have to store them together. And we've gone back, we've undone a change, which was the replace, essentially. And we've gone back a change, and now we're back to the cursor locations just before the edit happened. If I undo again, oh, it says nothing left to undo. Yeah, which is fair, because all we did was to select and do a search, which is just moving the cursor around. Or it's moving selections around, and they're kind of the same. And let's say I did the edit as 2 steps, so we could... Ooh, yes, I forgot. Help. Okay. Let's... I'm so not used to Kakuen. Okay. So we do a search, which is not... remember, this is not an edit. This is just moving the cursors around. So we search. Now we delete, and now we go into insert mode and then say hello. And now we have 2 steps of the process. We have the initial document, we have the deleted version, and we have the replaced version. They're like 3 steps in our undo history. And if we were to undo back to the deleted version, then we should end up with the cursors here, because they're where they are. Hold on, is this a bad example? I think this might be a bad example, because in both cases, if we were to undo again and then redo, then the cursor's in the same place, because we haven't moved. Maybe let's make it a different example. So we're back to this state, and we do a delete, and then instead of replacing directly, we move a couple of characters over, and now insert hello. Oh, that doesn't look very nice in Rust. And now that's our edit. So if we were to undo at this point, like, what would we expect to happen? Well, we'd expect to put the cursors, at least I'd expect the cursors to go into a position where I could immediately start doing the insert again. So I'd expect it to do this, which is what it does. And then undoing another step would go back to this state where we've got our selection ready to do the edit. But if I were to redo, remember we still got 3 tree snapshots, right? We've got the beginning snapshot of the tree. Oh yeah, it's going to be this side for you, right? So we've got the beginning, then we've got a version where we deleted edit success. We've got this version, which is what we're at right now. Then we made an edit, we deleted this. And so stretch. We've now got another snapshot, and then we've got another snapshot again, which is the insert. But we moved the cursor in between those two. So what I'm trying to say, this is like not working as an explanation, but we would undo here to this location, but we've loaded the middle snapshot. So if we undo and then redo, oops. Oh no, I've cleared the thing. Ugh, this is annoying. Okay, so we undo to here, and then what I think should happen is if we undo and redo, then we undo and redo, then the cursor's in a different place. If we redo and undo, then the cursor is now here, it's to the right. I feel like this has been such a ramble, like, and everyone's just leaving the stream. Just like, ha. But yeah, I don't know. This is a hard problem, and it's hard to explain. So, but I think this is the right thing for Sapling, because Sapling also treats. This is kind of a byproduct of the cursors being selections, right? And in Sapling, cursors are also selections, and so I think this kind of having two states for undoing and redoing is logical. Not sure if that. Not sure if we needed a 37-minute stream to figure that out. I don't know. You decide. But yeah, I don't know. That was a very weird rant, I think. Yeah. Yeah, and well, yeah. I mean, I think that was a useful discussion. Like, I think perhaps it could be viewed as like a waste of time to discuss something so like kind of trivial for 38 minutes, but like, yeah, exactly. And the thing is, I think it's very bad. It's very difficult to make a properly unintuitive undo system. Right? Like a lot of things, a lot of different ways. There are a lot of different ways of doing undo and redo, like moving the cursor around, that could feel intuitive. And it just like the one that Sapling's currently got is just clearly not working, because we make an edit and like, I don't know, replace with false, and we undo. I didn't want to go back to the cursor, like the root. I wanted to stay here. So something's clearly not working with what we've got right now. But I think it's just like, there are loads of different things you could do. Like you could, I don't know, always move to the location of the edit, as opposed to doing this, like storing two possible routes. But yeah, it's kind of a weird thing, I think. But I don't know. I think I feel like we've come to a conclusion with that. It's a bit of a, like, I don't know. It was quite a bit of a waffly stream, kind of. It's kind of not the right word, but you get what I mean. Like it was a lot of talking about weird, different, like hand wavy stuff. So, I mean, like, I'm impressed that people have listened to this. I would not, but yeah. Anyway, I think that's enough hand wavy discussion. I think, I don't know. I think maybe we could alternate doing coding streams and kind of like hand wavy discussing. So that the question about the right thing to do would would change depending on what you did, and I think that's true in as much as uh, you would expect the cursor, if you were to redo over, say, an insertion, we would expect the cursor to end up in a different place. But I still think it can be generalized as you have an edit, and then we have the cursor location on both sides of the edit. And when we undo, if we move over that edit, we want to snap to the cursor location on the side of that one. So if we, well, this way for you, if we redo over an edit, we expect to end up just past it. And if we were to somewhere on further down the history and we were to undo, we would expect it to be just in front. I don't know if that makes any like intuitive sense or not, but I think that's what editors should do. And I think what Vim does is not the best. And that kind of makes sense, to be fair, because Vim is a very, very old text editor. I think a lot of this stuff was not really okay, so that clearly does make at least a bit of sense. Like Vim didn't have a lot of chance to look back at other examples. So like for me, I can play around with, oh, what does Vim do in this situation? And oh, what does Kakao do in this situation? Because I have text editors to look back on. Whereas Vim is like one of the first, or VI and all of the things that Vim is like a descendant of. All of those editors kind of hark back to a day when there weren't kind of loads of visual text editors around for people to take inspiration from. So it kind of makes sense that Vim wouldn't, like, Vim's decision was made so long ago that it might not be the correct one for today. It's 5-minute rambles in 5 words. But anyway, I think this has been a decent stream. I'm like, I have a Zoom online quiz with my family at 8, which is in a quarter of an hour. So I'll probably go and get sorted for that. But yeah, well, so I don't understand. Oh, yes, yeah, I do that as well, to undo and redo to get to the location of the last edit. I think there's like Control O and Control I. Ooh, wrong editor. Control Vim. So if we were to move the cursor around, then Control O jumps to the last location, right? So and then Control I does the opposite. So O and I jump to like the last time we made an edit where our cursor was, and then Control O. Hold on, what? Okay, I don't understand what Control O and Control I do. They clearly do different things to what I thought. But I feel like the conclusion that we've come to is, if not necessarily the right one, it's good enough to be worth implementing and see what happens. It's just like really tricky. I was trying to explain to someone there, Stokos, on GitHub, because he's like very keen to do loads of stuff, and that's great. Like, it's really nice to have people like that. But I was really struggling to like visualize, like, what actually do I want to happen enough to like explain to someone to put it into a computer. Like, what do I want undo to do? And I just couldn't figure it out. It was so confusing, particularly as what Vim does is quite unintuitive, I think. And it just took a while. But, you know, it's like something that people will, if Sapling is usable, it will be something that people will use so much that it's probably worth it's worth the time getting it right now, rather than either just leaving it not the best or forcing people to relearn halfway through like the editor existing. That's just like not the right thing to do, I don't think. But yeah, anyway, I think that's the end. So thank you all for coming. It was a fun stream. I'm pretty tired, in all honesty. Like, I hope it made some semblance of sense. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll be streaming next week. Hopefully on my new computer. That'd be great. Although, like, it probably will look exactly the same to everyone else. But yeah, that's it for today. Bye.